are plenty of human hybrid creatures that have been seen in mythology for hundreds and hundreds of years, and with these prevailing legends comes the people who believe that these creatures might be based in some sort of reality. From the tales of the Echidna to the human-plant hybrid and so much more, here are the top 10 unsettling human hybrid stories that might be real. Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot we have the Centaur. This is one of the most famous hybrid creatures of all time, the infamous horseman of Greek legends. It isn't quite clear exactly how this legend originated, but there is a really interesting theory which I love. Basically, some people believe that perhaps the idea for this creature came about when the people of the Minoan culture, who are said to have possibly at the time been unfamiliar with horses, they ran into a tribe of horse riders. The skill these people had in riding horses, along with how being able to traverse on horse would of course change the way that the Minoan people lived, basically just inspired them to create these tales of the horse-human hybrid creature. This seems like a very possible origin for the legend, but regardless of where it came from, the legend stuck around into Roman times, where it was then highly debated whether or not these creatures actually may exist. Clearly, however, this legend would go on to endure long past the days of ancient Rome, considering the fact that the tales of the Centaur still exist today. In our number 9 spot today we have the Echidna. The Echidna is a half-woman, half-snake creature that first became well known through Greek mythology. In the legends, she is described as being half-beautiful maiden and half-fearsome snake. In fact, Hesiod described her as an irresistible monster who is like neither mortal men nor the undying gods. Instead, she was, quote, half a nymph with glancing eyes and fair cheeks, and half again a huge snake, great and awful with speckled skin, and she, quote, dies not nor grows old all her days. Echidna is the partner to Typhon, who is a terrifying snake man, and the two are said to have created the most horrendous children. The first child was Orthrus, who was a two-headed dog who guarded the cattle of Geryon. The second child was Cerberus, who was a dog with more than two heads who guarded the gates of Hades. And finally, their third child was the Lernaean Hydra, a serpent with many heads who had the ability to regrow any if they were to get cut off. This is all to say that Echidna had quite a terrifying story to her, and it's interesting because some scholars believe that the tales of dragons in medieval Europe were actually based in part on Echidna. In our number 8 spot today we have the Mandrake. If you're a Harry Potter fan, you might be familiar with mandrakes, and they are particularly interesting because they are one of the few examples that represent a human hybrid that is a mix between human and plant. The mandrake plant is a very real group of plants in the genus Mandragora, and they are usually found in the Mediterranean. It is believed that the tales of the mandrake come from the fact that often the roots of the mandrake have such a strange appearance they sort of look like human faces. This likely would have been enough to fuel the legends, but things do not end here. The thing is that this plant has some hallucinogenic properties, so that, combined with the weird face-looking roots, and you have the perfect recipe for quite a legend. It's funny to think that this story probably started out because someone was on a bit of a trip. In the legends, when the plant is dug up from the ground, it will release a horrible scream that has the ability to kill anyone who hears it. In our number 7 spot today we have the Sphinx. The Sphinx is of course commonly associated with ancient Egypt, and it is the creature that is depicted with the head of a human, the body of a large cat, and the wings of an eagle. Like I said, this image is often associated with ancient Egypt due to the famous monument that can be visited in Giza still today, but this isn't the only place the Sphinx is seen in legends. In Greek tradition, the Sphinx plays the role of a merciless woman who will kill and eat anyone who cannot answer her riddle, as seen in the tragedy of Oedipus. When we take it over to Egypt, the Sphinx is often seen with the head of a man and was seen as a benevolent creature with incredible strength. The legends and imagery of the Sphinx have long endured the years since these ancient empires and continue today, and have even expanded into different cultures. In our number 6 spot today we have Sirens. These creatures originated from the tales of ancient Greece, and in these stories, Sirens were creatures with the head and upper body of a human woman, but with the legs and tails of a bird. bird. These creatures were alluring and exceptionally dangerous, mostly to sailors. The siren would sing a beautiful song from the rocky shores, which were said to hide dangerous reefs below the water. Using her songs, she would lure sailors to this treacherous area, likely to meet their demise. The siren is an important character in the legend of Odysseus as he returned from Troy in the epic. In the legend, he had to tie himself to the mast of his ship in order to resist the temptations and the lure. The tales of the siren have lasted for years and were still quite prevalent when they made a reappearance in the writings of 17th century Jesuit priests, who believed that these creatures were in fact real. Today we still use the word siren and the term siren song to describe things or ideas that are exceptionally intriguing and alluring. Throughout the years, the descriptions of the siren have gone on to become a bit more mermaid-like than bird-like as they originated, which does bring me to my next point. In our number 5 spot today we have mermaids. Mermaids are one of the most famous creatures in our modern mythology that came all the way from ancient Assyria. These creatures with the upper body of a human and the lower body of a fish, all from the goddess Atargatis, who transformed herself into a mermaid after she was ashamed of herself for accidentally killing her partner. A tragic story that spurred the tales of mermaids for centuries to come. Since these legends, mermaids have appeared in stories all over the world, and often people regard them as less than fictional. Christopher Columbus swore he saw real mermaids on his voyage to the New World, but then again it's becoming abundantly clear that he had no idea what he was looking at for a lot of that journey. Some places and cultures have slightly varying versions of the mermaid, like the Selkie, which is an Irish and Scottish version of a mermaid who is half seal and half woman. Of course, this creature went on to inspire many famous stories, including the Disney smash hit, The Little Mermaid. In our number 4 spot today we have a harpy. Harpies are a character seen in Greek and Roman stories, and in those they are described as a bird, but with the head of a woman. And at first I thought that sounds kinda nice and cute, but when we take it back to some of the earliest mentions of harpy, like by the poet Ovid, we see them described as human vultures, which sounds significantly more terrifying than what I was imagining. In fact, harpies are quite often described as horrifying, disgusting creatures, with descriptions that only get more grim as time goes on. Initially, it seems as though harpies were seen as the personification of storm winds, and throughout the legends we see that they would often steal food from their victims as they were trying to eat, and also they would be responsible for carrying those who had done evil things to the Erinyes, who were the female deities of vengeance. When a person suddenly disappeared off the earth, it is thought to have been the work of the harpies. They were the agents of punishment who were known to be cruel, vicious, and pretty violent as well. In our number 3 spot today we have the Gorgons. It is possible that you may not be familiar with the term Gorgon, but it is very likely that you know one of them. The descriptions of the Gorgons do vary slightly, but they commonly refer to 3 sisters: Stheno, Euryale, and Medusa. These sisters were mostly human, except for the fact that their hair was made up of slithering, slimy snakes. The earliest examples of the Gorgons comes from the Greek mythology, in which the Gorgon-like creature had scales and claws, but no serpent hair. When the tales of the 3 sisters came into play, so did the stories of how they had horrifying faces that, should anyone gaze upon them, they would immediately be turned into stone. In the legends, 2 of the sisters are immortal, but the most famous of the trio, Medusa, was not. This led to her being slain by the demigod Perseus, but not so much could be said for the other 2. In our number 2 spot today we have the Minotaur. This creature was first seen in Greek legends and later Roman, and basically it is a creature that is part bull, part man. The name of this creature comes from the bull god Minos, who was a major deity in ancient times. The Minotaur is said to have been created as Minos competed with his brothers as ruler. During this time, Minos prayed to Poseidon, the sea god, to send him a snow-white bull as a sign of the god's favor. Minos was meant to sacrifice the bull in order to honor Poseidon, but he was entranced by the bull's beauty and decided to keep him, thinking that the god would accept a different sacrifice in place of the bull. Of course, Poseidon was not pumped about this decision, so he needed to punish Minos. He did this by making Minos' wife fall in love with the bull, and one thing led to another, and there was some very unnatural offspring. In the end, the Minotaur was born, but there was no natural food source for this creature, so instead it began to devour human flesh to appease its appetite. The creature is depicted as having the head and tail of a bull, bull with the body of a man. While the most famous appearance of the Minotaur was in the Greek story of Theseus, who actually fought the Minotaur in the labyrinth, the legend of this creature has long prevailed and is seen in many stories still today, including Dungeons and Dragons, and some would even argue that the Beast in Beauty and the Beast is a creature modeled after the Minotaur. In our number 1 spot today we have the Satyr. We're not just talking about Mr. Tumnus, we're taking it all the way back to the Greek stories of the creature who is half man and half goat. These creatures started out in legends as a male nature spirit with ears and a tail resembling those of a horse, but throughout the years they became more human-like and less beast-like before they began to gain these more goat-like characteristics. It is thought that perhaps the depiction of the goat-human hybrid comes from them sort of melding with the character Pan. Either way, these creatures are often depicted as being comically hideous, and they also have quite a few lewd descriptions that I can't exactly detail here on YouTube. Let's just say it is very obvious that they're always a little excited. This fits perfectly with the fact that these creatures are often known to love things like wine, music, dancing, and definitely women. Satyrs were companions to the god Dionysus and are believed to live in places like woodlands or the mountains or even in pastures. They are very motivated by sexual desires and are even known to do some pretty horrendous things in pursuit of these desires. Although these characters are quite ridiculous in a multitude of ways, they are also thought to possess a lot of really useful knowledge, but they need to be persuaded into sharing it. How human. That's the most human-like characteristic that these guys have. Alright guys, that has been our list for today. Thanks so much for checking it out. I've been your host today, Olivia Kozlowski, and I will see you again soon. Bye!